Homage to root teacher Buddha Shakyamuni, homage to wisdom warrior Manjushri, homage to lineage masters. The profound Dharma is rarely found. Now we hear it. May we realize its true meaning. In order to liberate all sentient beings from samsara, generate supreme bodhicitta. Next, we will discuss the sufferings of the hell realms as described in the preliminary practices. We have already provided a detailed introduction to the various sufferings that are experienced within the 8 major hot hells. Today, we will begin to discuss the second major category, also known as the neighboring hells. The neighboring hells are divided into 5 types: the blazing pit hell, the filthy excrement hell, as well as the razor plane hell, the forest of sword leaves hell, and the iron pillar mountain. Some sutras refer to it as the copper pillar mountain hell. There isn't much difference between iron and copper, but perhaps iron is a bit better. Everything described within the iron pillar mountain consists of weapons and blades. Generally speaking, weapons that were primarily made out of copper. For instance, included things like knives, a variety of different spears, and swords. If made from copper, are not of very good quality. Iron should be a bit better. But in some Han region sutras, it is referred to as the copper pillar hell. The karmic forces of sentient beings are all different. You could put it that way. So these 5 particular types of neighboring hells, in reality, are described as such specifically according to the Tibetan language. Neighboring refers to the areas near the Avicii hell, its surroundings. That's why they're called neighboring hells. This is one way to explain it. I've seen that in some Han Buddhist scriptures. They mention the wandering increasing hell. After the beings who are in the hell realms are finally able to leave the deepest Avicii hell or the 8 primary hot hells, they continue to wander aimlessly to many other places, which only serves to greatly increase their ongoing suffering and their terrible afflictions. So their pain keeps increasing, hence the name wandering increasing hell. This is also another way to explain it. In any case, on all 4 sides of the Avicii hell, as mentioned earlier, there are the burning pits and the cesspools of corpses and excrement. This also includes places like the incredibly vast field of razor-sharp blades, the terrifyingly dense forest of sword leaves, and the daunting mountain of red-hot iron pillars. In fact, some ancient scriptures specifically mention, and it's worth reiterating what I said before, that surrounding each and every one of the 8 major hot hells, there are these additional smaller hells of torment. For example, around the reviving hell, there are 4 types. It's described that around each major hell, such as the black rope hell and the assembled hell, there are additionally 4 different kinds of hells as well. A number of different scriptures also happen to describe it in this particular way. For instance, the important text, known as the Sutra on Contemplating the Buddha's Samadhi, describes a great many of these different hells in detail. It also provides explanations on this aspect. For example, it says, it is said that there are 18 specific types of cold hells, and also 18 different types of dark hells. Then there are 18 types of the minor hot hells, as well as a further 18 types of the chariot of fire hells, and so on, among many others. There are a vast number of hells that are described in specific detail. Here we are talking about the neighboring hells. To provide a more concrete example of this immense scale, it is described that there exist 5 billion distinct sword-leaf forest hells, as well as an equally astounding 5 billion copper pillar mountain hells, as well as 5 billion iron mill hells, and so on. There are many such descriptions. This reminds me of what the previous Guru Rinpoche once said when teaching the words of my perfect teacher. The 18 types of hells mentioned here are just a general overview. They are also categorized according to the types of suffering experienced by sentient beings. In reality, in hell, each sentient being's consciousness is different, and the karma they have created is different, so the results they experience are also completely different. Therefore, there are countless hells with all kinds of scenes and conditions, truly innumerable. This is indeed how it should be. For example, if we consider our world, it becomes apparent that for each person, and this can vary greatly depending on the country or even the specific region, the established laws and regulations that are used to punish sentient beings in these different places are certainly not the same and often show significant variations. So the conditions in prisons in each country may also be different. There are even people in the world who specialize in investigating prisons. They study what prisons are like in the United States, what prisons are like in China, and so on. There are groups of people who spend their whole lives researching prisons. But in the end, the conclusion they might reach is that There are all kinds of differences, an endless variety. In the same way, there are indeed all sorts of different situations in hell as well. Here we are referring to some of the major sources, such as the Sutra on the right mindfulness of Dharma, the Long Agama Sutra, and the Vinaya Sutra, and combining the descriptions of certain specific hells found in these texts. Therefore, the general classification of the sufferings of hell as described in Tibetan Buddhism is basically the same as what is described in these sources. Therefore, here we are talking about the neighboring hells. All of them are located around the Avicii hell. Among the neighboring hells, there is also one called the river without ford hell. In resting the nature of mind, the river without ford hell is also discussed. These neighboring hells are situated around the Avicii hell. These are distributed with 4 located in the east, 4 situated in the south, another 4 positioned in the west, and a final 4 found in the north. When you combine the hells from each of these 4 cardinal directions, it results in a grand total of 16 neighboring hells altogether. In the southeast, there is an Iron Pillar Mountain, and likewise, there is one each in the southwest, northwest, and northeast. These are all described below. Next, we will talk about the first one, the blazing pit hell. The beings in the Avicii hell, due to a slight reduction in their karmic force, are able to leave the gate of Avicii hell. Earlier, we discussed the Avicii hell. For an extremely long period of time, beings fall into hell. Of course, there is also the Vajra hell mentioned in the Vajrayana teachings. The suffering and lifespan in the Vajra hell far exceed those of the Avicii hell described earlier in the exoteric teachings. Moreover, those who are reborn in the Avicii hell and Vajra hell are those who have broken Vajrayana vows. Nowadays, many people are especially eager to seek Vajrayana teachings. It is good to seek Vajrayana teachings, but most people do not seek the teachings on upholding vows. After receiving the empowerment of Vajrayana teachings, some people feel that everything is already accomplished. It's as if, after having a meal and feeling full, nothing more needs to be done. They think there are no further consequences and that's it. But listening to Vajrayana teachings is not like that. I hope that when many people are looking for a teacher, they first observe carefully. After hearing Vajrayana teachings, one should examine for oneself how to uphold the vows. For example, the 25 root vows and branch vows of Vajrayana. There are also the root vows explained in the glorious web of magical illusion. These vows must be observed. If you don't keep them, it is indeed very dangerous, to be honest. Nowadays, some masters in the exoteric tradition always advise against studying Vajrayana. I think there's nothing wrong with saying that. If one's foundation is not solid and one doesn't learn about the vows, it's just like in the exoteric tradition as well. Some people only go to receive the novice monk or bhikkhuni precepts. But they don't actually study the precepts at all. If you don't study the precepts, you might break them without even realizing it. This is also very dangerous and could even lead to falling into hell, which is truly terrifying. Similarly, in Vajrayana, when it comes to the topic of Vajra hell, the clarification of vows tantra also describes the various sufferings of Vajra hell. And in the commentary on the glorious web of magical illusion, it is also explained. Once the beings in Vajra hell have seen their hell destroyed, in an instant they are transferred to another Vajra hell. They continue to experience suffering without end. So the lifespan and suffering in Vajra hell are truly immeasurable. Therefore, for those practicing Vajrayana, you should first treat all your Vajra companions, especially those who have received empowerment, together with you with harmony and kindness. You must not treat them as objects of your anger, constantly slandering or harboring hatred toward them. Even fighting or physically attacking them, such actions break your vows. You should also show proper respect and reverence to your root guru and Vajra masters. Otherwise, you may listen to Vajrayana teachings and receive empowerments today, but after some time, because of some trivial personal matters, you start to slander them. Nowadays, some people behave in truly frightening ways. They say things like, back when I received the empowerment, it was like this or that. They claim there was a mistake at the time, and now from this point on, they want nothing to do with you. When it comes to worldly relationships, today you can ignore someone, and tomorrow you can reconnect. It's up to you. It's just like lay people nowadays. Today they get married, tomorrow they get divorced, then a few days later they remarry, and then divorce again. This kind of back and forth happens all the time, and it's not a big deal. As long as you follow the rules of the world, there's nothing else to worry about. But the teacher-student relationship in Buddhism isn't something you can just end whenever you want. It's not something you can slander or abandon at will. It's not like that. From the perspective of your alaya consciousness within the continuum of your mind, a deep karmic connection has already been established. Consequently, this is a particular issue that must be approached with a great deal of caution, and it is something that absolutely deserves our immediate and focused attention. When you finally free yourself from the Avicii hell, it is at that very moment that they happen to see something far off in the distance, an unusual patch of incredibly deep pitch-black shade, or alternatively what appears to be an absolutely wondrous and mysterious pit. At that time, having suffered for such a long period in the Avicii hell, they are filled with an immense sense of joy, and with great eagerness they hurry toward what they perceive as their destination. But their journey concludes in tragedy, as in the end they fall helplessly into a deep pit filled with a fiercely burning, all-consuming fire. Inside this inferno, their flesh and bones are quickly scorched and then horribly charred. The physical pain they experience is completely unbearable, a truly excruciating and unending torment. What they saw at first was a wondrous pit, or, as some ancient scriptures describe in great detail, it is considered to be a particularly pleasant and altogether wondrous and beautiful shade. At that moment, they just want to rest for a while and cool off. But by that point in time, they have unfortunately already fallen into the fiery pit, suffering an immense and unimaginable torment. So, when we talk about the profound suffering in this particular hell, many people genuinely feel a cold chill run down their spine. It is truly terrifying. This leads to the question, what then is the primary cause for being reborn into this dreadful hell? There is a scripture called the Sutra of the Six Realms of Rebirth. We referenced it some time ago, and in that sutra it is stated, it mainly refers to monastics or lay practitioners who break their precepts. If they break their precepts, they will be reborn in the fiery pit. If one truly relies on the spiritual path of renunciation, yet at the same time does not make an effort to uphold the fundamental moral precepts, they will inevitably fall into the fiery hell, a place where their physical bodies will be utterly and completely destroyed and left to decay. Therefore, if one relies on the path of renunciation and takes the lay or monastic precepts, but if later on one does not properly uphold the precepts, they will fall into the fiery pit. First, they will fall into hell and then into the fiery pit. Their entire body will be scorched and decayed, suffering great pain. There is also a very important Buddhist scripture, a sacred text known as the Buddha Speaks the Treatise on Establishing the World Abhidharma. Within the teachings of that particular sutra, a profound question is asked: what are the specific reasons that cause a person to fall into the terrible suffering of the fiery pit? The text explains that this is because in our past lives we ourselves may have cruelly thrown some sentient beings into blazing fire pits, or perhaps forcefully cast them onto scorching hot sand, or deliberately placed them upon searing, burning coals to suffer, and thus brought about this kind of suffering. Even some people who make the conscious decision to break important moral precepts will also inevitably find themselves experiencing that same kind of suffering. Therefore, during the course of this very life, it is incredibly important that we take the time to reflect on ourselves as well. Have we in fact created the very causes that result in us falling into the fiery pit? If we have truly created these causes, then the result will inevitably ripen. Therefore, for this reason, we must repent well in advance. That is, before we die, it is absolutely essential that we repent. If you do not purify yourself through the act of repentance, then it is an absolute certainty that that seed will sprout. To give you an example, if a person has already been subjected to some kind of poison, if the poison is not successfully neutralized, then sooner or later it is inevitable that it will take effect. At that specific moment in time, all of your personal suffering will, in the end, prove to be completely and utterly meaningless. Therefore, what is being discussed here is a detailed examination of the immense suffering that is said to be endured within the eternally burning abyss that is commonly referred to as the fiery pit of hell. Secondly, it talks about the hell of excrement and filth. When beings escape from the fiery pit, they see, from a distance, a continuously flowing river, because in the previous great kalpa, they had always been in the midst of flames, suffering intensely and enduring extreme torment. So they feel parched, their mouths dry and tongues scorched, unbearably thirsty and in great pain. The moment they see the water, they are overjoyed and rush over to drink it. But when they get closer, there is no water at all. Instead, they have already fallen into a pit filled with the rotting corpses of humans, horses, dogs, and other animals, reeking with a foul stench. Everywhere is covered in filthy mud swarming with insects. It is an especially filthy and disgusting place. These unfortunate souls are completely submerged in it, from the very tops of their heads down to the tips of their toes. Meanwhile, terrifying insects with incredibly sharp, iron-like beaks swarm over their helpless bodies, viciously competing to peck at them. It is truly unbearable suffering. Upon seeing a river outside after coming out of the burning pit, they think of going there to drink, but it turns out it's not a real river. It is actually filled with especially filthy substances, just like the disgusting filth that can be found in some very unclean rooms nowadays. They have already completely fallen in, their entire body and even their head are submerged deep inside and experience immense pain. So why does one get reborn into such a place? The cause of this rebirth mainly lies in what people do while alive. By deceiving sentient beings in various ways to enjoy offerings and wealth, this is also related. As stated in the Sutra of the Six Realms of Samsara, the teachings describe a specific consequence. It says that for those feigning a dignified conduct while also seeking to survive by completely improper means, their fate is that one inevitably falls into the dreadful prison of corpses and filth, a terrible place where they are to be relentlessly pecked at by countless maggots. Therefore, if while alive we feign dignified conduct through deception, pretending to be a practitioner in front of others, and making a living through improper means, then after death one will definitely fall into this is the hell of decaying corpses and putrid filth that was just described. Furthermore, countless swarms of maggots and other insects will begin to feast upon you, inflicting an unbearable suffering that torments both your body and your mind. The Abhidharma on establishing the world also explains why one is reborn into the hell of corpses and filth. During our lifetime, while we are still alive, if we, through our own actions, take and throw any kind of living being, and this could include small insects or any other type of creature, into places filled with foul and filthy excrement, or into other areas that are considered exceptionally dirty and unclean. This is one cause. There is another in the past when we were human or caused others, such as centipedes or other similar predatory beings, which are known to actively prey on a wide variety of smaller animals. I often think that in this modern age, many people living in our cities are eating insects, various kinds of fish, shrimp, and animal meat on a daily basis. And while it's true you may eat them in this life, it's worth considering that in the next life, they will be the ones to eat you. This is a cycle of vengeance. There is no doubt it will happen this way. So, some people open restaurants and some work in restaurants where everyone happily eats lively, wriggling creatures. As a result, in your future lives, it won't even take a few decades before you start to become these beings, and they will begin to peck at and eat you. Therefore, we humans have indeed created countless karmic actions, yet we ourselves are still unaware of it. We even think that we are living especially happily in this world, wealthy and powerful. A couple of days ago I went over there to release animals. In specific locations such as Hongyuan, it's important to note that the local Tibetan pastoralists are also living in a state that is considered comparatively prosperous and financially comfortable. But over there, the killing of living beings is also especially frightening. Because now they are impacted by the economic and social changes. Many young people's sense of karma and consequence is becoming increasingly vague, while money is becoming more and more important in their minds. Life is inseparable from money, whether you are considering buying a motorcycle, a car, or perhaps even a house. It's a fact that nearly all kinds of temptations require money to pursue. And the truly disturbing part is that this money is often built upon the very lives of other sentient beings, which is especially terrifying. Now, in many places in Tibetan regions, the killing of living beings is truly frightening. In the big cities of Han regions, everyone should also be aware of this. For those who are wealthy, perhaps living just one day, this action creates a heavy and negative karma, a debt from which one cannot escape the agonizing hell realms for what feels like countless, innumerable years. The fact that this karma has already been created is a concept that is truly and profoundly terrifying to contemplate. Therefore, the immense and unimaginable suffering that one must inevitably face in the depths of hell is something we humans are unknowingly creating. Without sincerely repenting, I'm afraid that many people will indeed find hell right in front of them the moment they close their eyes. A lot of people nowadays worry about what will happen to them when they get old. What will happen with medical insurance? What about pension insurance? I've seen that in big cities, including among some Buddhists. When talking and communicating with them, many people really don't have any fear of falling into hell or the lower realms. There are two reasons for this. On one hand, it's because they don't value the law of cause and effect regarding the next life. On the other hand, it's because they're especially attached to this present life. Therefore, if someone is truly a good practitioner, then in this life, these few short decades, no matter how you live them, it doesn't really matter. No matter how nice your house is or how fancy your car is, they can't stay with you for long. Once you leave this world, all your karma will be waiting for you ahead. This is precisely the reason why the truly great masters, and also some of the most dedicated practitioners from the past, placed a particularly special importance on the concept of the next life. As a matter of fact, just recently I was reading some accounts about the direct disciples of the highly esteemed Venerable Chibai Guang, figures such as the renowned Fearless Armor and the revered Jigme Gyalwe Nyugu. And within their own biographies and personal accounts, it's written that they themselves indeed wrote about this, about how, during their practice, they feared the cycles of rebirth and karma in the next life. When you look at this aspect, compared to many practitioners nowadays, including some who are quite famous or have a certain amount of wealth and influence, practitioners and monastics sometimes don't talk about these things at all. They only talk about things like money, status, and property in the present. This really isn't the way of a true practitioner. Nowadays, it sometimes seems like people really want to be practitioners, and nothing else matters to them. I hope that after studying the preliminary practices, many Dharma friends will also be able to see through worldly concerns. At the very least, deep down, you should have a real fear of hell. If you are truly afraid of hell, then in this very life you will definitely pay attention to what you accept and reject. If you don't even have the slightest sense of fear about this, then our practice is nothing more than a superficial appearance. Many people nowadays are especially eager to pursue advanced teachings, insisting on having some higher instructions or more profound practices. I've thought about this over and over again in my heart. With so many of us, we must first practice the preliminaries well. Within the preliminaries, we start by establishing the common preliminaries. If the common preliminary practices are not practiced properly, it's truly very difficult to accomplish any of the higher teachings. If these advanced teachings could really be practiced successfully by everyone and benefit everyone, I too have received many transmissions from my greatly kind teachers in the past. In terms of texts and theory, I should also be able to explain them. So if it truly benefits everyone, as practitioners of Mahayana Buddhism, we should abandon self-interest. Even if I were to fall into hell myself, I would still be willing to transmit some of these teachings to everyone. To give a large number of tantric teachings and empowerments, I may not be very skilled at giving empowerments, but at least after studying for a day or two, I should be able to do it. I think giving empowerments is quite easy. It's not particularly difficult. After studying for a few days, one could go around giving empowerments and teaching pith instructions. It's possible, but does this actually benefit everyone or not? Based on my own feelings and experiences from years of study and practice, what benefits everyone the most is to establish a solid foundation, especially the teachings on the precious human life, the impermanence of life, and the law of karma and its effects. In particular, understanding the terrifying nature of the hell realms is truly necessary. Some of the old practitioners I used to know would always say, "Sai, will I fall into the lower realms?" They were especially afraid of that. Nowadays, it seems that many people don't really feel anything about this. Personally, my own practice is quite poor, but I am truly afraid of falling into hell. Sometimes when I see certain Buddha names, the merits of reciting them say that after reciting this Buddha name, one will not fall into the lower realms. That makes me especially happy, and I immediately want to recite it. Then, when I come across some mantras, as I did recently, I found a record I had made before about the merits of a certain mantra. At that time, the Choje said that those who recite this mantra will not fall into the lower realms. I was very happy, so I kept reciting it for a long time. So every time I see this, I also know that in this life and in past lives, I must have created many causes for falling into hell. Now there is a way, by reciting Buddha names or mantras, or through practice if one can avoid falling into the lower realms. This is the best kind of protection, the best kind of safety. So I think that many of you here After studying the preliminaries this time, on one hand, I hope that everyone truly develops an aspiration that is not for fame or profit. Fame and profit are fleeting and not very meaningful. You must have a genuine wish to practice. That is very important. Secondly, everyone should believe that there is a long journey in future lives. At that time, every sentient being is especially afraid of suffering. Whenever we talk about the suffering in hell, we really feel afraid. A couple of days ago, a few volunteers said, "I feel extremely miserable in this department. I really can't take it. It's so painful, so tormenting, so heartbreaking." But I think here we eat well and dress well. In every aspect, if you compare it to the suffering in hell, it's really not that painful. What suffering is there, really? True suffering is what you experience in hell. So I think nowadays many people in the world, some suffer emotionally, some suffer because of their status, and some people experience just a little bit of pain, and they feel as if the sky is about to fall. But in reality, that's not the case. All the various sufferings in this world are definitely bearable. But the suffering in hell is absolutely unbearable. It's extremely agonizing, indescribably painful, yet you have no choice but to endure it. Because when your karma manifests, you still have to pay for it with your own body and mind. So everyone must be mindful of this. Next, I'll talk about the third one, the field of sharp blades, beings who have escaped from the filthy mud hell. At first, they see what appears to be a beautiful, inviting green meadow, and so they happily make their way towards it. But what they ultimately encounter is something else entirely, a terrifying field of sharp blades, all made from deadly weapons. Swords, spears, knives, awls, and all kinds of weapons grow from the ground like grass. The entire ground is covered with iron thorns, shaped like grass, sharp and burning with fire. It's truly terrifying. When the right foot steps down upon this terrible ground, that same right foot is immediately and completely pierced all the way through. Then when the left foot follows and steps onto this field of sharp blades, the left foot is also pierced through in the same manner. However, as soon as the foot is lifted up again, due to the powerful manifestation of these sentient beings' karma, everything on the ground instantly returns to its original undamaged state. I remember in the Yogacara Bhumi Shastra, it also specifically and vividly describes the harrowing conditions of the blades ground hell. In this place, all the flesh on the outside, the very bones themselves, and even deep into the bone marrow, are all completely and thoroughly pierced through, an experience that is extremely and unimaginably agonizing. Then, quite miraculously, the moment you lift your foot, your body is restored, and not even a single trace of the terrible wounds remains. Everything has already returned to its original state. And when you step on the ground again, you suffer the same pain. The feeling at that time is exactly the same as it is now. When you lift your foot, it returns to its original state. Then, after that initial agony, when you attempt to step down once more, the experience is exactly the same as it was before. The sharp blades immediately shoot up from the ground, piercing completely through your feet, causing an excruciating and overwhelming pain. So, what is the primary karmic reason that leads a being to be reborn into this particular hell of repeated suffering? The answer to this question can be found within the teachings of the Sutra of the Six Paths verses. This sacred text explains that if a person, during their lifetime, promotes false teachings and heretical paths, and through their words and actions actively works to weaken or discredit the true Dharma, the entire path will be completely filled with razor-sharp blades, forcing them to carefully walk back and forth repeatedly. There is such a scriptural reference, which means that if someone constantly speaks of heretical ways and actively destroys the true path, while committing all manner of evil deeds, then it is said that after you die, the road you walk on will soon be covered, completely and entirely, with a great multitude of incredibly and extremely sharp thorns. This is the inevitable result of the karma you have personally created. You will have absolutely no choice but to endlessly walk back and forth upon this unforgiving field of sharp blades. The translation of the Sutra of the Six Paths verses ought to be properly credited to the Indian monk known as Dharmadeva, who was a notable translator who originally came from the region of central India and was active during the Song dynasty. What I mentioned earlier was the Sutra of the Six Realms of Rebirth. The Buddhist scripture, known as the Sutra of the Six Realms of Rebirth, is traditionally understood to have been compiled by the esteemed Indian philosopher and poet Bodhisattva Asvaghosha. It should also be noted that a translation was completed at a later date, and this most likely occurred sometime during the period of the Northern Song. The individual who was responsible for carrying out the translation of this text was a person named Rinpoche, and it is also an important detail to note that, in addition to his role, he was a person of Indian nationality. And now regarding the specific text known as the Abhidharma of Establishing the World, which is the one that I have only just a moment ago mentioned to you, it is important to acknowledge that in addition to any primary or earlier versions that had already been completed, a further distinct translation of the work was also produced at a subsequent point in time. This particular scholarly and linguistic undertaking was carried out by an individual whose origins can be traced to the vast and culturally rich geographical area that is known as Western India, thereby contributing another unique perspective to the text. I've forgotten which translator it was. It's also noteworthy that the translation was carried out by a scholar from India, the original land of Buddhism. These sacred texts, encompassing both the sutras and the shastras, genuinely provide a foundation of excellent scriptural evidence, and I have personally verified that all of these significant texts are indeed compiled and preserved within the great collection known as the Chinese Tripitaka. We hope that Dharma masters, scholars, and practitioners in the Han regions. For a more profound comprehension of Buddhist teachings, it is highly beneficial to read through these sutras of the Buddha. The Abhidharma of Establishing the World, the text I just mentioned, serves as a primary example, as it mainly expounds upon the Buddhist views associated with the common vehicles tradition. In essence, its meaning and teachings are considered to be largely similar to those found within the Dirgha Agama Sutra. This is a scripture, but what it discusses is a treatise. I think that treatise is included in the Abhidharma section of the Tripitaka. That must have been the approach of the translators at the time. So it's interesting to find that when we look back at history, particularly during the Great Tang or the prosperous Song dynasties, many of the most famous translators working in China were in fact scholars who originally came from India. For instance, two prominent examples are the masters Bodhiruchi and Kumarajiva. The one I just mentioned should be Master Paramartha. He was from Western India. It is widely conjectured that he made the long journey to China at some point during the historical reign of the notable Emperor Wu of the Liang dynasty. Master Paramartha was the one who translated it. People like Paramartha, Dhanapala, Fahu, and so on, all of them were like this. In Han regions, aside from a few individuals like Xuanzang, in historical times, most of the translators who journeyed to China originally came from the lands of India. But in our modern world nowadays, it certainly seems as though there are none left. Sometimes when I look at it, not to mention Indians coming to China to translate, there are very, very few people who actually come here to study. The majority of them, it seems, just open some shops in China selling things like pizza and, of course, Indian curry. Speaking of Indian curry, I went to try it the other day, and that Indian gentleman there, he actually makes the flavors quite well. He really genuinely knows what he's doing in that particular area. Now, in some hotels in Chengdu and Shanghai, there are doormen specifically stationed at the entrance. In some big hotels, and there are Indians who are specifically there to open and close doors or car doors, things like that. As for real Indian masters coming here to preach or engage in philosophical exchanges, that is something that basically never happens. I remember back in the 1980s, there was Master Osho. Probably many people here have heard of him. He caused quite a sensation at the time. In India, it was once commonly said that influential figures like Master Osho, Mahatma Gandhi, Gautama Buddha, and Jawaharlal Nehru were among the top 10 people who had profoundly shaped the nation's destiny. Initially, Osho was widely and genuinely trusted by many. However, this perception began to change, particularly after he relocated to the United States, where some of his more unconventional ideas started to gain attention. This was largely because his teachings were characterized by a remarkable degree of intellectual openness. He delved into a diverse spectrum of philosophical systems, drawing from traditions like Confucianism, Buddhism, and many other schools of thought. Consequently, as his work began to gain international attention, he became especially popular in the United States. I seem to remember that he had about 300,000 followers at the time. He had this kind of following not only in the US but also in other Western countries. But later, some of his actions, like the destruction of families and his excessive greed for wealth, fame, and profit, became particularly severe. Sometime after this, the United States government officially banned him from entering the country. While he was serving his time in prison, a multitude of significant events were unfolding. On a personal note, I had previously read some of his philosophical teachings. The core of his argument was a controversial claim that the foundational teachings of major historical figures like the Buddha, Jesus, and Muhammad did not, in his view, fully reveal the complete truth. He said that only he could speak about the ultimate truth of the universe. Sometimes this really isn't much different from some of the cults we see today. But ultimately, he himself died around 1990. Some people claim that he was actually poisoned to death while he was in the United States. So at that time, his particular kind of thinking and philosophy was relatively quite popular and well received outside of China for a temporary period. But now it seems that what India exports more is so-called labor services. As for the ideological and technological exports that people talk about in society today, India's influence in China and Tibet is basically non-existent. In the past, whether it was Han Buddhism or Tibetan Buddhism, after arriving in India, India's, not to mention Buddha Shakyamuni, but also the later 6 ornaments and 2 supreme ones, as well as the profound and insightful thoughts of a multitude of wise masters, these profound ideas truly within the context of our world, cannot be fully measured or comprehended by any other existing doctrine or system of knowledge. This is quite similar to the unique Buddhist philosophy taught by Buddha Shakyamuni, which remains relevant even today. Indeed, it is in a category of its own. Neither Confucianism nor any other religion, ideology, or philosophy can compare to it. Many intellectuals present here may have studied various kinds of knowledge, but in the end, only under the wisdom of Buddha Shakyamuni, everyone is sincerely convinced and cannot help but respectfully accept it. Therefore, on one hand, we should be especially grateful for the thoughts and knowledge from India, and because of that, we really ought to make sure we have a deep and abiding sense of gratitude. Especially in the Tripitaka of the Han regions. I have gone through many volumes of the Tripitaka of the Han regions. Many Indians came to learn Chinese and then started translating. There were a great number of them, though I don't know if that's still the case now. It seems that the other day I saw a Rinpoche who was preparing to invite some translators from India and Western countries, planning to spend 25 years translating the entire Tripitaka to translate it all into English. There is such an aspiration as well. But these translations may also take quite some time. When Choje went to India in the past, we also had exchanges with Indians at that time. But during the process of these exchanges, it now feels like Indians seem to be more familiar with Brahmanism and Hinduism. There are quite a number of wise individuals, because nowadays Tibetan Buddhism and people from so-called Hinduism in India often hold seminars, both regularly and irregularly. I've also watched some videos and interacted with some wise people in the past. Apart from this, those who truly spread Buddhist thought to Han regions and the United States, there are actually relatively few people from other regions or countries. So with each century and era being different, the figures who emerge may also be different. Therefore, nowadays, the eminent monks and great masters from Tibet, especially in the West and in Europe and America, have in fact been genuinely instrumental in bringing the foundational ideas of Buddhist thought to the wider Western world. There are actually quite a few such people. It's not that I'm praising Tibetans just because I am Tibetan myself. It really is the case that in the West, many people originally had no understanding at all of the Buddha's truths. Many Rinpoches and great masters, through their teachings and various actions, have ultimately helped people come to truly understand Buddhism. There are quite a lot of such people. So here I would like to introduce the few scriptures I just mentioned. I think that sometimes fellow practitioners here should open up the Tripitaka, especially those teachings that explain the suffering of samsara and the principles of karma and its effects. You should take a look at the Tripitaka and see which parts are explained especially well. If something is explained particularly well, since these are the Buddha's words, you can use them for your own recitation. You should examine them for yourself. See which actions lead to rebirth in which realms, and what kinds of actions cause one to fall into certain places. So after you understand these principles, everyone will naturally become more cautious and develop self-restraint. Now, let's delve into the details of the Swordleaf Forest. This realm is inhabited by beings who have only recently managed to escape from the very hells we just discussed. Before them, a truly pleasant and wonderfully delightful grove comes into view, a welcoming sight for any traveller. They can see that the trees within it are especially lush and abundantly leafy, their dense foliage forming a rich green canopy. This interplay of light and shadow makes the entire forest scene look particularly and exceptionally beautiful. Just like some of the forests we have in the human world now. A couple of days ago, I watched something called Song of the Forest, which talked about the vast and ancient forests located in regions like Xinjiang and Yunnan. Furthermore, the introduction explained that these very same forests are, in fact, the original birthplace for the truly dazzling and wide variety of delicious fruits that we see available for purchase on the market today. The narration was also very well done. In actuality, it is an undeniable fact that there genuinely exist some forests that are incredibly dense. If it were in our human world, you could go inside and rest. You would have that opportunity, and it wouldn't immediately turn into another kind of world. But that's not the case for beings from hell. When you are especially happy to see some groves outside, and you go there due to the force of karma, you rush over there in high spirits. But instead of a pleasant grove, what you encounter is a forest of sword-like leaves. You see that on the iron trees grow countless leaf-shaped blades, extremely sharp. Other scriptures also make mention of this fact, that it is said that these forests are completely and utterly filled with all kinds of weapons. Once inside, the weapons are especially terrifying. When the powerful wind blows, these terrible weapons proceed to tear the bodies of these beings into countless horrifying pieces. Afterwards, their bodies miraculously return to their normal state, only to be viciously cut apart all over again in an endless cycle. They repeatedly experience the unbearable pain of being cut apart over and over again. This is the suffering of the forest of sword leaves. The Yogacara Bhumi Shastra also describes this. When the beings in hell are just about to sit down and rest in the forest, the wind of karma begins to blow, and as it does, all the heavy, sharp branches and countless razor-edged leaves from high above suddenly come crashing down directly onto you, violently tearing your entire physical body into literally thousands and even tens of thousands of tiny, shredded pieces. Their bodies are covered in wounds, enduring immeasurable suffering. What kind of karma leads one to be reborn in such a forest of sword leaves? As mentioned earlier in the Buddhist scriptures, specifically in the Sutra of the 6 Realms of Rebirth, it says, if one plots to harm others, one will fall into the forest of sword leaves. If we harm others through various negative actions and intentions, as is often said in the world, if you plot to harm others, this specific kind of negative karmic retribution will inevitably cause you to be reborn and fall into the hell realms. Furthermore, to provide additional support from the scriptures, in the Abhidharma of establishing the world, it is explicitly stated that while we are living here in the human realm, if we choose to use knives and a wide variety of other weapons to inflict harm upon others, if we take pleasure in fighting and the skillful use of weapons, such people will then fall into this kind of forest of sword leaves. Moreover, in this hell there is a rain of various weapons that falls down. For example, just imagine that spears, knives, needles, and all sorts of other similar weapons are raining down upon your body from all directions. At that moment, your entire body becomes the direct cause of what feels like endless and unbearable suffering. You should know that there are also spiritual teachings which describe this very thing. So when we look at the world around us, it's possible that there are some people who are particularly and unusually fond of weapons. I think in this regard, Han regions is a bit better. Among tens of thousands of people in Han regions, it's rare to see people carrying knives or guns, and now the national laws also prohibit it. Such cases are quite rare. In the Tibetan region, sometimes, perhaps due to karma manifesting, the situation is still relatively worse. Some time ago in my hometown as well, people were using knives. Without any major grudges, they just hack others to death. It's truly terrifying. So those who carry knives or such weapons will definitely fall into the terrifying swordleaf forest. There, they will be hacked countless times by the sharp leaves, which is an extremely frightening experience. That covers the swordleaf forest. Next, we come to the Iron Pillar Mountain Hell. The beings who are reborn in this hell are mainly those who destroy pure conduct, as well as monastics who break their vows, or for the lay people, meaning ordinary individuals who are found to engage in sexual misconduct. They will be reborn in the Iron Pillar Mountain Hell. These beings, driven by the force of their karma, arrive before the terrifying Iron Pillar Mountain. At the foot of this great mountain, where the forest is especially dense, the karmic wind blows them there. At this moment they hear from the mountaintop the companions they once loved with suffering of suffering, calling out their names. just as described in the Sutra of Mindfulness of the True Dharma. This friend calls your name in an especially endearing voice, and then says how deep your connection was in the past, how attached I was to you, and how good you were to me as well. So why don't you come embrace me now? I've been waiting for you all this time, and so on, using all sorts of so-called sweet words from the world to begin luring him in when he hears this. Because the habits from his previous life are reawakened, he truly cannot resist. Some sentient beings are fully aware, while others may not know at all, but regardless they risk their lives, and so they start climbing up the treacherous mountain, striving to ascend. As a direct result, their bodies are painfully pierced by the sharp downward-pointing branches growing from the unyielding iron tree. All of this happens because their karma is manifesting before them. The leaves above all turn into weapons, and these weapons stab down into your body as you struggle to climb upward. Some scriptures describe how your own internal organs and intestines are all pierced and strung through the leaves of the tree. In some cases, everything from your muscles to your bones and even your bone marrow is completely pulled out. When you are finally exhausted and suffering beyond words, you reach the top of the mountain, and at that moment your body is restored as if nothing happened. But when you get to the top, where are your beloved friends? All the iron-beaked crows, vultures, and other birds of prey come to peck at the oil in your eyes. They start with the oil in your eyes, then move on to your entire body, including your internal organs and bone marrow, eating everything until nothing is left. Just as they finish devouring you, your karma manifests and you are revived once again. At this moment, you hear voices calling out to you from the foot of the mountain. So, as always, you rush down the mountain again. All the branches and leaves at that moment, all the branches and leaves of the weapons pierce into your body, stabbing straight through your chest and out your back. When you reach the foot of the mountain, there await the iron men and iron women, filled with extreme terror, as well as all kinds of iron-beaked dogs, crows, and other such animals. They begin to embrace you, devouring the marrow of your brain. They will swallow your entire head completely whole, beginning to chew on it with an incredibly slow and meticulously thorough motion. And as this happens, from the very corners of their gaping mouths, a steady and constant stream of white, pulpy brain matter can be seen dripping out without end. The beings who end up there are made to experience this specific kind of truly unbearable and quite extraordinary pain. Indeed, it is crucial to understand that being reborn in the terrifying Iron Pillar Mountain Hell is mainly a direct result of the various sufferings that are caused by what we refer to as the powerful emotions within this world. In fact, to provide more context, within the sacred scripture known as the Sutra of Mindfulness of the True Dharma, it is explained that there are many explanations about the causes and effects, the experiences, and the retributions related to Iron Pillar Mountain. It describes a great deal of suffering. In the final summary, it asks, what are the causes of all these sufferings? What is the reason for the burning? The cause is wrongful desire. Why do so many pains come to burn both body and mind? The final answer is wrongful desire, the desire of craving. It is the so-called greed and craving in the world that serve as the cause and ultimately lead to all kinds of suffering. So, in the end, the Buddha also said that our minds are especially frightening. We should guard our minds with right understanding and right mindfulness. Otherwise, we definitely cannot be confident. We must know that the mind cannot be trusted. Our current greed and anger, this particularly frightening mind, have caused us countless times to be in various hells, experiencing boundless and immeasurable suffering. So sometimes when I see some monastics and lay practitioners who are truly willing to let go of everything and devote their brief lives to spiritual practice, one must put down everything, all matters, completely. No matter what, I must wholeheartedly devote myself to spiritual practice. This kind of choice is truly excellent. But for some people, perhaps various karmic forces also arise. There was once someone who said she thought about it for 3 or 4 years before ordaining as a monastic. But just a few days after ordaining, because she encountered some negative circumstances again with a single wrong thought, she broke her vows and returned to lay life. A person's karmic force is truly terrifying. Some people really wish for their virtuous intentions to keep growing, but in the end, their karmic obstacles are so deep that they can't succeed, and instead, it becomes the cause for falling into hell. Therefore, those who believe in cause and effect should carefully contemplate these principles, and then they will pay attention to what they accept and reject. Especially, one should first use right understanding and mindfulness to guard one's own mental continuum and precepts. These are indeed very important for a practitioner, including lay people. Nowadays, because greed is especially strong, many families are not harmonious. People engage in too many acts of sexual misconduct and other improper behaviors. In fact, even in this very life, it brings a lot of suffering to oneself. And as for the cause of falling into the iron pillar mountain hell in future lives, that is even more terrifying. Regarding the 8 hot hells and the 16 neighboring hells mentioned above, as well as the suffering of the iron pillar mountain hell, after carefully analyzing them in detail, go to a quiet place and begin to contemplate with your eyes closed. In fact, if we truly want to practice, we all need to do this. We must go to a quiet place. We should thoroughly contemplate and meditate on all the principles we discussed earlier. Some time ago, someone spoke to me. He asked, "Can you teach me a meditation method?" I said, "The 4 common preliminary practices are what we meditate on every day." He said, "That's not acceptable. You must give me another meditation method." I replied, "No matter what world I end up in, I won't teach you another. This is the most supreme meditation method. Many people need to have a sense of intention for practice. Without the intention to practice, just having theoretical knowledge is not enough. In the history of Buddhism, when discussing our lineage, there are lineages of theory, lineages of actual practice, oral transmission, and many other types of lineage. So now just having a theoretical lineage is not enough. There must also be a lineage of actual practice. Even a lineage of actual practice is not sufficient. You also need to put it into action. You must practice it personally. So how should we visualize? Now imagine that you have truly and clearly been reborn there. In a hell filled with terror and suffering, think to yourself, I have already been reborn in the hells described above. Then, on second thought, right now I am not actually reborn in those hells. It is only in my mind, this way of thinking, this intention. Yet it is still so terrifying, so painful, truly frightening. And in reality, the number of sentient beings who have truly fallen into hell is countless. In fact, all these beings must have been my father or mother in past lives. And it is also uncertain whether my current parents, as well as many friends and relatives, after death, whether they will not fall into hell. Do we have any certainty about this? None of us do. The beings who are now experiencing the suffering in hell, most of them are actually some of our relatives from this very life, and there are certainly such cases. As for our parents from past lives, without a doubt, all of them are like this. In fact, the main cause for being reborn in those hells is hatred. And for people like us, whether in past lives or in this life, we have definitely created countless negative karmas of anger and hatred, the karma of hatred. Milarepa also said, the main cause of the lower realms is anger. Even at the cost of our lives, we should practice patience. The main cause of the lower realms is hatred. We must cultivate patience, even if it means giving up our lives. We must not harbor hatred. Otherwise, we will definitely be reborn in those hells mentioned above. Many of us have generated a lot of anger and hatred. Some people say that in 12 years, they have never once lost their temper with fellow practitioners. That is very good. Some people seem to get angry once a year, some once a month. Some get angry once a day, and some get upset every hour. Today they argue with this person, tomorrow with that person. All of these are causes for falling into hell, and this has been explained very clearly here. Now we have already obtained a precious human life with leisure and opportunity. We are also fortunate to have encountered a teacher who possesses the authentic qualities of the Dharma. We have listened to such profound instructions and have such a wonderful opportunity to practice the Dharma, such a good opportunity to practice the Dharma. At this very moment, we must make a firm resolve, so that in the future we do not fall into those lower realms. We must persevere and diligently practice without giving up. Truly, everyone needs to have this kind of determination. I think there is no need to explain this in detail. If you have the intention and wisdom, reading it several times yourself, you will be able to feel it. If even reading the Vajra words of Patrul Rinpoche doesn't move you, then you will probably trust my ordinary rambling words even less. Contemplate these teachings again and again, and deeply regret the heavy negative actions you have committed in the past. Sincerely confess and make a firm vow that from now on, even if faced with mortal danger, you would rather die than commit the negative actions that lead to hell. On one hand, by repenting past wrongs and guarding against future ones, you should remain vigilant with yourself. On the other hand, for those beings who are currently suffering in hell, generate an extremely strong compassion and make aspirations for the countless sentient beings trapped there. May these sentient beings be liberated from the lower realms right now. We should also think in this way. Everyone should practice as described above, using the complete approach of preliminary practices, main and concluding practices. Especially as Patrul Rinpoche explains here, many of our parents from past lives, as well as our current relatives and friends, are now in hell. Why is that? Because most of them have not accumulated much virtue, let alone being liberated to Sukhavati. Even the karma to truly be reborn as a human is rare. Many of us, just think for yourselves, how have your own relatives and friends who have passed away done? And what about those who are still alive? What kind of karma are they creating? So, for these beings in hell who are currently suffering, we should sincerely wish to help them attain liberation. Let us all recite the Avalokiteshvara mantra together. Om Mani Padme, Om Mani Padme. Om Mani Padme, 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 Om Mani Padme. Om Mani Padme, 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 Om
It requires that we practice with the preliminary practices, the main practices, and the subsequent practices.
This practice is in the 3 guidance texts. Each guide has explained the methods of the preliminary practices, the subsequent practices, and the main practices. The book Memorandum of Preliminary Practices also talks about here. Due to time constraints, I haven't explained this latter part in detail. But every time we talk about the sufferings of these hells, it's best to actually practice yourself to truly imagine being reborn in the blazing pit hell or in the iron pillar mountain hell. And keep thinking in this way. While we are alive, have we created the causes mentioned above? Reflect on this carefully yourself. If you have created the causes, they will definitely ripen unless you confess and purify them. So for the negative karma that we have accumulated, we should confess, and we ought to do so sincerely. Truly, confession is very important. Without confession, the Dirgha Agama Sutra says that there are mainly 2 causes for falling into the lower realms. One is breaking precepts, and the other is holding wrong views. One refers to breaking the precepts after entering the Buddhist path, and the other is fundamentally lacking correct views, or having once had right views, but now having lost them, those who do not believe in cause and effect. So most of us, as Buddhists, we should believe in cause and effect. However, due to the manifestation of our own karma and the influence of our environment, many people have not truly engaged in genuine practice. Therefore, when we talk about the words of my perfect teacher, it is very important for everyone to experience a change, a transformation in their hearts. All right, we'll stop here for today.
Om Bandharangara Padma Sodargye Bandharangara Padma Sodargye Bandharangara Padma Sodargye